When you think about where you live, your apartment or your house or whatever, there is this baseline expectation of privacy that we all just kind of implicitly accept.
Oh, absolutely. You cross the threshold and you're in your own world.
Right. You close your front door, you lock it, and the outside world stays strictly outside. But I want you to imagine living in a place where that boundary just simply does not exist.
Which is terrifying to even think about.
It really is. So today, for this deep dive, we are heading to Mumbai, specifically to this older, just intensely packed neighborhood where a sprawling complex called Ashwin Heights stood for decades.
Yeah. We really need to picture this physical environment because it's crucial.
Exactly. It's this massive, crumbling concrete apartment building, and it's squeezed right between these chaotic streets and densely tangled canopies of electrical wires.
I mean, families had been living there for generations.
Generations, yeah. And the walls are notoriously thin. The ceilings leak during the monsoons. The noise of the city and, your neighbor. It's just this constant, inescapable hum.
So in a place like that, everyone literally knows everyone else's business.
There are no true secrets, or at least that is what the residents of Ashwin Heights thought.
Well, exactly, because the physical environment almost entirely dictates the social environment there.
Oh, totally.
Like when you can constantly hear your neighbor's television or the clatter of their dishes or even their private arguments, you develop this false sense of complete transparency.
You assume you know everything about the people on the other side of the plaster.
Right. But the mission for today's deep dive is to look at a terrifying chronological account we've sourced. It's called The Secrets Within the Concrete.
Such a chilling title.
It really is. And we are going to trace the exact timeline of how one child's completely innocent comment at the dinner table basically unraveled a decades-old true crime nightmare.
Yeah.
And as we dig into these records, we really need to explore that incredibly fine, often blurry line between, severe shared psychological trauma and phenomena that simply defy any logical scientific explanation.
Okay, let's unpack this because everything begins with an 8-year-old boy named Kabir.
Just a totally normal kid.
Exactly. It is a completely normal evening. The family is sitting around their small table having dinner, just chatting about their day. And out of nowhere, Kabir just stops eating.
He just freezes.
Yeah, he looks over at the blank kitchen wall, stares at it for a second, and then casually whispers to his parents that Mrs. D'Souza, who is one of their neighbors down the hall, hides a massive stack of money under her kitchen sink.
Which is such an oddly specific thing for a kid to say.
Right. And not just that she hides it there, but that she sits on the floor and cries while she counts it.
I mean, it's this bizarrely intimate detail.
Yeah.
And naturally, a mother's first reaction to something like that is to just, laugh it off.
You just assume your kid has a wildly active imagination.
Exactly. Or maybe they misunderstood some gossip they heard out in the courtyard.
Yeah.
But when they asked him how he could possibly know that, Kabir claimed very calmly, without any theatrics, that the man inside the wall told him.
Ugh, that phrase just makes my skin crawl. The man inside the wall. And honestly, it probably would have just been a weird, creepy thing a kid said, completely forgotten by the weekend, except for what happens literally the very next morning.
The timing is incredible.
It is. The local police show up at Ashwin Heights, and they actually arrest Mrs. D'Souza's adult son.
Wow.
And the charge, stealing a large sum of cash that was hidden exactly where Kabir said it was, right beneath the kitchen sink.
See, it's the kind of hyper-specific coincidence that instantly makes everyone in the building a little bit uneasy.
Oh, absolutely. But frankly, I have to push back on the supernatural angle right out of the gate here.
Go for it.
Because we just established that Ashwin Heights is a crumbling, overcrowded building with notoriously thin walls. Isn't this just a case of a kid acting as, like, a human ring camera?
A human ring camera? Yeah?
Right. I mean, couldn't he just be eavesdropping on the neighbors through the air vents or the warped floorboards and simply repeating the neighborhood gossip he overhears?
Well, it is the absolute most logical first assumption. And honestly, it's exactly what the adults in the building desperately wanted to believe.
Because it's safe. It's normal.
Right. Eavesdropping perfectly explains the kitchen sink incident. If Mrs. D'Souza was crying, she might have been arguing with her son, and, sound travels.
Especially in a building like that.
Exactly. But that rationalization absolutely falls apart when you look at how Kabir's behavior escalated over the next few weeks. He wasn't just repeating loud arguments anymore.
He was getting into the really dark stuff.
Yeah, he started accurately describing things happening inside locked, isolated apartments that he had never, ever stepped foot in.
Like what?
Well, he knew which seemingly happily married neighbor was carrying on a quiet, secretive affair. He knew which tenant was secretly drinking heavily every single night after their family went to sleep.
Oh, wow.
And most disturbingly, he knew about an elderly man in the building who kept a loaded gun meticulously hidden behind his bookshelves.
Right, and that is the crucial difference. A hidden gun isn't making any
Like
noise.
they
You can't eavesdrop on a secret that no one is talking about.
Precisely. These aren't loud domestic disputes echoing through an air shaft. These are quiet, shameful, heavily guarded secrets.
Yeah, things people go out of their way to hide.
And to understand why this wasn't just a child playing an elaborate prank or snooping through people's windows, you have to look at the severe physical and psychological toll it was taking on Kabir.
Because it really affected him, right?
Tremendously. This wasn't a fun spy game for him. His health actually began to deteriorate. He stopped sleeping through the night. Deep, bruised-looking circles formed under his eyes.
That's so sad.
It gets worse. He would just pause in the middle of a normal conversation, his eyes tracking something invisible, looking off to the side as if he were listening to someone standing right next to him.
Oh my God.
There's this one particularly disturbing incident from the case files where his mother wakes up at 2 a.m., she notices his bed is empty, walks into his bedroom, and she finds her 8-year-old son kneeling on the floor in the pitch dark. He has his ear pressed completely flat against the solid concrete wall, and he is just whispering back into the plaster.
Just whispering into the wall at 2 a.m.
Yeah. This is an obsession. It's completely consuming his reality.
It is incredibly unsettling. I mean, you can just imagine the profound helplessness his parents must have felt.
Oh, definitely.
But at first, knowing about a neighbor's hidden bottle of liquor or an affair, it's disturbing, yes, but it still falls under the umbrella of localized drama. It's neighborhood gossip, just acquired through seemingly impossible means.
Right. It's creepy, but not criminal.
Exactly. But the entire narrative violently shifts gears the day Kabir decides to walk up to apartment 7A.
Yes. So apartment 7A belonged to the elderly man with the hidden gun, a resident named Mr. Sharma.
The guy with the gun behind the books?
That's the one. He was a quiet, unassuming man who kept entirely to himself. And one afternoon, Kabir knocks softly on his door. Mr. Sharma opens it, probably expecting the boy to ask for a lost cricket ball back or something entirely mundane like
It's
that.
just normal kid stuff.
Right. But instead, Kabir just looks up at him, deadpan, and asks, "Why did you leave her under the floor?"
Oh my God. That is just chilling. The kind of sentence that completely stops time.
Yeah, Mr. Sharma apparently went completely pale instantly, slammed the door, and didn't come out.
And then what happened?
Well, 2 days later, this quiet elderly man goes up to the rooftop of Ashwin Heights and jumps to his death.
Which is awful. And of course, that immediately triggers a massive police investigation. A suicide of that nature requires looking into Mr. Sharma's life, his background, and, searching his apartment.
Naturally.
And when the local authorities pull up the floorboards in apartment 7A, acting on rumors of what the boy had said to him, they actually find human remains.
It's unbelievable.
The forensic investigation quickly reveals the victim was a young woman who had been reported missing all the way back in 1987.
So if we've escalated from uncomfortable neighborhood gossip to a literal cold case homicide, the local beat cops must have realized they were entirely out of their depth.
Oh, they had to have. Suddenly, Kabir isn't just the weird kid who knows your embarrassing habits. He's the kid who knows exactly where the bodies are buried, literally.
So who actually takes over a scene like this?
This is where Detective Adili Rao enters the picture, and she is such a crucial figure in how this account unfolds.
What's her background?
Well, what's vital to understand about her mindset is that she is a forensic pragmatist to her core. She does not believe in ghosts, she does not believe in talking walls, and she certainly doesn't believe an 8-year-old is a psychic detective.
She wants the facts.
Exactly. She believes in empirical evidence, and she believes in patterns. And the pattern that genuinely terrifies her about Kabir is his accuracy rate.
It's flawless.
It is 100%. Every single detail, every hidden crime or secret he has spoken about has been independently verified as true.
And she gets her biggest, most horrifying lead yet from a drawing Kabir does at school.
Right, the teacher flagged it.
Yeah, the teacher flags it and hands it over to the police. It's not a typical child's drawing of a house or a dog. It's a harsh, chaotic picture of a woman crying inside a pitch-black room. And there are disembodied hands reaching through the walls all around her, clawing at the space. And above the picture, Kabir wrote in big block letters, "They can't breathe in there."
They can't breathe in there. That drawing perfectly coincides with an anonymous tip the police had on file regarding screams that were heard decades earlier inside a specific unit, apartment 4C.
Which was empty, wasn't it?
Yes, 4C had been sitting completely empty for years. The owner had vanished without a trace back in 1994, and the unit was just locked up and left to gather dust in this weird legal limbo.
So what does Rao do?
Detective Rao, following the flawless pattern of Kabir's accuracy, reluctantly decides to reopen this cold case. She secures the warrants and actually orders a construction crew to literally sledgehammer open the bedroom wall of this empty apartment.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, it really does.
Because of what those workers actually find, and how perfectly it matches the horrific details of what Kabir drew.
What was in the wall?
The workers don't just find a single set of remains. They find 3 completely intact skeletons.
3.
3 of them. And they are entombed entirely upright inside the solid concrete of the bedroom wall.
That is horrifying.
It gets worse. Forensics notes that their mouths are forced open, their jaws locked in screams, as if they had been buried alive, gasping for air as the wet cement poured over them.
Oh my God. Which completely flawlessly lines up with Kabir's caption. They can't breathe in there.
Exactly. And if you look at this logically, the math just does not work. Those bodies were sealed behind undisturbed concrete in 1994. Kabir is 8 years old.
Right, he wasn't even born yet.
It is physically, logically impossible for him to know the exact physical positioning of remains hidden inside solid concrete before he existed.
So how do people even process that?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the public, the media, and even the authorities react to this undeniable impossibility. When human beings are faced with something that entirely shatters their fundamental understanding of physics and reality, our default psychological defense mechanism is to attack the anomaly.
We blame the messenger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of treating Kabir as this miraculous, albeit terrifying asset to a homicide investigation, he becomes a total pariah.
Poor kid.
The media descends on Ashwin Heights, news crews are swarming the courtyard, and aggressive psychologists are constantly demanding to interview him. People in the building actually start accusing the child of being possessed by demons.
Of course they do. People panic.
Right. Others accuse his parents of somehow masterminding this, like coaching him to say these things to get attention or a payout.
Which is absurd. How would the parents know about the skeletons in the concrete?
It's a textbook case of extreme cognitive dissonance. People would much rather believe a family is orchestrating an elaborate, morbid, practically impossible hoax than accept the terrifying reality that an 8-year-old is actually communicating with the concrete of their building.
Yeah, they alienate him completely to protect their own sanity. But, I mean, you can't ignore the physical evidence. Finding 3 bodies inside one apartment wall is a massive tragedy and a media circus in its own right.
Oh, absolutely.
But when Detective Rao finally sits down with Kabir again, after those 3 bodies in 4C are officially identified, she tries to get some kind of closure on this. She asks him directly whose voices he is hearing now.
His answer just breaks the entire history of this building wide open.
She visits him personally, and the toll this has taken on him is so obvious. He's completely exhausted. He's terrified. He looks hollowed out.
I can't even imagine.
He tells her that when this all started, the walls just whispered to him. But now, they scream. Yeah. When she presses him gently, asking whose voices they are, hoping for maybe one more name, Kabir just looks at the living room wall and says, "People nobody found."
That is so eerie.
And then he delivers the line that completely changes the scope of the investigation. He says, "They say the building is full."
The building is full. That single sentence forces the authorities to completely pivot. They realize they aren't looking at an isolated domestic murder in apartment 4C anymore.
They're looking at a mass grave.
Yes, they are looking at the structural history of Ashwin Heights itself. They dig deep into the city's architectural archives and find that in the late 1970s, the building underwent massive, sweeping renovations.
Okay.
And the contractor entirely in charge of that project was a man named Ramesh Vora.
So who was Ramesh Vora?
Ramesh Vora is the architect of this nightmare. On paper, he was just a mid-level contractor securing city bids. In reality, investigators quietly link him to a massive string of disappearances. Transients, runaways, and marginalized people all across the city.
And what happened to him?
He himself conveniently vanished without a trace in 1981. But acting on Kabir's statement, Rao orders workers to start scanning and opening more walls in the complex.
And what do they find?
They find 2 more bodies in the lobby, then another wall on the 3rd floor. More bodies. Over the next week, they discover over 12 sets of human remains hidden throughout the fundamental load-bearing structure of the building. Men, women, children. Some of them had been missing for over 40 years.
Okay, I have to stop and ask a massive logistical question here because my brain is really struggling with the physics of this.
Sure, what is it?
Ashwin Heights is a crowded, noisy, densely packed residential building. How does one single contractor turn an occupied, buzzing apartment complex into a literal mass grave without any of the tenants noticing what he is doing?
It's a very fair question.
I mean, it defies belief that you could physically entomb over a dozen people right next to families eating dinner, watching TV, and living their daily lives.
It seems logistically impossible until you look closely at the methodology of a psychopath using their profession as the ultimate camouflage.
Okay, explain that.
Well, when investigators went back and interviewed the older tenants who had lived there during the 70s, people suddenly started remembering anomalies they had completely rationalized at the time.
Like what kind of anomalies?
They remembered strange, sweet, rotting smells during the construction months. But here's the thing about urban living. If you're in a building with failing plumbing, overflowing garbage in the alleys, and active industrial renovations, you rationalize a bad smell.
Right, you assume it's a dead rat in the walls or backed up sewage.
Exactly. They remembered neighbors suddenly missing, too. But in a transient, bustling metropolis like Mumbai, people pack up and move away in the middle of the night all the time without saying goodbye.
That makes sense. But what about the noise? You can't just silently murder someone.
That is the most chilling detail. Vora used auditory camouflage. Penance remembered him working at odd hours. He would run massive industrial drills, knock down drywall, and use the sheer chaos, the thick dust, and the deafening noise of his own construction site to completely mask the screams of his victims.
Oh my.
The noise of the drills covered up the blunt force trauma, and the chemical, overpowering smell of fresh industrial concrete literally sealed the evidence and masked the decay. He built his crimes right into the architecture.
He weaponized the environment itself. I mean, it is brilliant in the most evil way imaginable.
It really is.
So the mystery of who did this is technically solved. It was Vora. But here is the profound, tragic irony of this entire story. You would think that finding the bodies, identifying the victims, and bringing the truth to light, well, you'd think that would bring closure.
You would hope so.
You'd think that after 40 years, the building would finally fall silent. But the act of physically breaking open those walls triggers the most terrifying, inexplicable sequence of events in the entire timeline.
Because the physical disturbance of the concrete seems to actively escalate whatever phenomenon is happening.
And it makes it worse.
Much worse. After the initial discoveries, the voices don't stop. They multiply and they grow significantly louder. It's no longer just highly sensitive Kabir hearing them. The veil drops for everyone.
Everyone in the building.
Yes. Entire skeptical families who lived in Ashwin Heights began frantically calling the police, reporting loud, desperate whispers inside their walls after midnight.
That is terrifying.
Plumbers reported the sound of human fingernails scratching echoing through the internal metal pipes. Tenants heard muffled crying directly beneath their floorboards.
Oh, no.
One woman practically broke down in a police interview, claiming she physically felt human hands pressing outward from beneath her floral wallpaper while she tried to sleep. The entire building is waking up.
And Kabir, who has completely stopped going to school at this point and is basically catatonic, gives this absolutely gut-wrenching insight into why the activity is spiking.
What does he say?
He tells Rao they don't know they're dead. They think it's still dark. They want someone to let them out.
Wow. And this mass panic leads to Detective Rao making a critical, desperate decision. She is clinging by her fingernails to her rational worldview.
Well, she's a pragmatist.
Exactly. She wants to empirically prove that this is mass hysteria, a shared psychological break caused by the trauma of the discoveries. Or she wants to find an environmental cause, like old pipes shifting or bizarre acoustic sound distortion from the wind.
So what does she do?
So during a severe rolling thunderstorm, she decides to stay overnight inside Kabir's apartment to scientifically document exactly what is happening.
And we have the exact sensory details from her official report of that night. And let me tell you, it reads like a psychological thriller where the protagonist's mind completely snaps.
It really does.
It's 1:43 a.m. The storm is raging outside, battering the concrete, and suddenly the building's electricity fails.
Complete suffocating darkness.
Complete darkness. Rao is sitting in a chair, checking her flashlight, trying to find a rational explanation for the draft in the room. And in that dead quiet, a voice whispers Detective Rao's first name.
From the...
Yes. A ditty. It's not Khmer. The voice is distinctly female, it's guttural, it's desperate, and it simply says, please. And it's coming from directly inside the solid plaster of the bedroom wall, mere inches from her ear.
Rao completely freezes. Her entire rational forensic framework collapses in that single second because it doesn't stop with one isolated voice.
Escalates.
Dozens of overlapping distinct voices begin emerging from beneath the concrete, whispering, sobbing, begging for help. The official report describes the walls themselves actually trembling softly, vibrating with mechanical energy.
That is insane.
And Kabir, who has been sitting completely silently on the floor, just listening to all of this with his eyes closed, looks up at the detective and whispers, "They know you opened the others."
And then absolute chaos erupts. Invisible hands start violently, rhythmically slamming against the inside of the walls. Thud, thud.
Like they're trying to break out.
Yes. The vibrations are so intense that framed pictures are rattling and shattering off the shelves. The apartment lights flicker violently back on as the grid surges, and in that harsh, strobe light illumination, Detective Rao sees dark, damp stains forming on the vintage wallpaper.
The paper actually bulges outward, right?
It does, stretching and taking the distinct three-dimensional shape of screaming human faces. The mouths are stretched wide open, screaming silently, pushing through the plaster.
Rao stumbles backward, utterly terrified, drawing her weapon on a wall. And Kabir just slowly points a finger toward the main, load-bawing hallway wall of his apartment and says, "They're closest there."
The very next morning, a visibly shaken Detective Rao brings in heavy construction crews to completely demolish that specific section of the hallway wall.
And what they find behind it is the absolute climax of this nightmare.
What was it?
Behind multiple layers of false walls and thick brick, they discover an entire hidden chamber, a massive void deliberately built into the architecture. And inside it, stacked together like cordwood in the pitch black, are 27 skeletons.
27? That is just, it's unfathomable.
The forensic details of that specific chamber are profoundly horrific. Most of the victims showed clear signs of blunt force trauma to the skull, meaning Vora likely knocked them unconscious before burying them.
But they weren't all dead.
No. The most disturbing pathology report noted that several of the victims had completely shattered fingernails, and the delicate bones in their fingertips were fractured into splinters.
Meaning they woke up.
Which means they weren't dead when Vora sealed the wall. They had eventually woken up in the suffocating dark and tried to physically claw their way out through solid, curing concrete.
So what does this all mean? I mean, when the dust finally settles on Ashwin Heights, the psychologists bring out their clipboards and they neatly blame everything on trauma-induced hallucinations.
They always do.
They write up papers saying the immense stress of living in an overcrowded building with such a dark, oppressive history caused a textbook shared psychosis among the residents.
And they dismiss Kabir completely.
Right. They claim Kabir simply had heightened environmental perception and subconsciously picked up on structural anomalies, like hollow spaces in the walls, and his brain filled in the gaps with stories. The official state stance is that nobody truly believes the walls spoke.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, there is one final, incredible piece of evidence that makes the neat, tidy hallucination theory almost impossible to defend.
The audio.
Exactly. And it comes not from ghost hunters, but from the demolition engineers themselves. While they were tearing down parts of the building to access the chamber, they had highly sensitive scientific audio equipment set up to monitor structural vibrations and stress fractures in the concrete.
Because it's standard procedure for a demolition.
Right. By pure unintended accident, that equipment captured the internal acoustic environment of the walls.
The unofficial recordings, the ones the city tries to pretend don't exist.
Yes. They remain unofficial, and authorities strictly deny their validity, but audio engineers who have analyzed the leaked files all describe the exact same phenomena.
What's on the tapes?
Hundreds of faint voices, layered intricately on top of each other, trapped inside the frequencies of the concrete. And clear as day among the static, the sound of children crying softly for help.
Unbelievable.
This is where we look at the theoretical mechanism of an acoustic signature. Sound, at its core, is just mechanical energy, right? Pressure waves.
Okay, yeah.
Is it theoretically possible that if someone is screaming at the top of their lungs, inches away from wet curing cement, the microscopic silicates and crystalline structures could freeze those exact sound waves in place?
Like a record.
Like an ancient phonograph cylinder, exactly. Trapping the vibrations of extreme human terror directly into the physical matter. In this case, technology, not flawed human psychology, verify the impossible. The concrete was acting as an acoustic sponge.
Which brings us to the tragic aftermath of all of this. Unsurprisingly, Ashwin Heights was immediately condemned shortly after that massive chamber was found.
They had to.
The remaining residents packed up whatever they could carry and moved away permanently, just scattering across the city. Kabir and his family completely vanished from the public eye, changing their names, presumably to try and find some semblance of a normal, quiet life, after being at the center of this psychological hurricane.
But the source material leaves us with one final, deeply chilling detail about the final days of Ashwin
What
Heights.
happened?
When the heavy city wrecking machines finally arrived to completely tear open the upper floors and bring the massive structure down for good, the construction workers reported something deeply disturbing.
More voices.
Yes, but different. As the heavy machinery cracked those thick concrete walls wide open, exposing those internal pitch-black spaces to the sunlight for the first time in over 40 years, the voices echoing out of the dust weren't screaming anymore.
Really?
They weren't crying or begging for help.
They were laughing,
Yes,
because after decades of being entombed in the dark, they had finally been let out.
it's a profound, terrifying shift from absolute terror to release.
It really is, and it fundamentally changes how you look at the mundane spaces we inhabit every single day. I want you, listening to this right now, to just take a second and think about your own surroundings.
Just look around the room.
Look around the room you're in. Think about the walls of your bedroom, or the quiet corners of your office, or the heavy floorboards of your apartment building. We assume that buildings are just inanimate objects, dumb combinations of wood, plaster, steel, and concrete. We think of them as blank slates that do nothing but silently shelter us from the rain.
But they might be recorders.
Exactly. If a building can so easily retain the physical evidence of the darkest, most horrific human actions hidden right under our noses, is it really that much of a stretch to wonder if those same physical materials can also record the acoustic echoes of that history?
It makes you wonder.
Like microscopic grooves on a vinyl record, just absorbing the energy of the people who lived there, waiting for the right conditions to play it all back. So the next time you are lying in bed late at night and the house is perfectly quiet and you hear the building settling, or you notice a strange, faint echo bouncing down the empty hallway of your apartment, ask yourself, are you just hearing the old plumbing shifting in the cold, or are you hearing the history of the walls themselves?